Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I've found in my travels. Today, I want to talk about a book that I read, one that I found at random from my local library. Don't forget to patronize your local libraries. Sometimes they have high quality books, and other times, if you pick one out random, it's a pretty, subpar book. But you still found an interesting book to read from the library, and that's why libraries are high quality. Anyways, the book that I am going to be talking about today focuses on white savior complex and indigenous people from Mexico. I am referring to The Zigzag Way by Anita Desai, which was published in 2004. For those who don't know, Anita Desai is an Indian writer who's been writing since the 1960s, so quite some time. Although her last book was published around 2011, so I don't think she's had anything published in the last 10 years. But still, she's been writing for quite a long time. Mostly novels. She's won some awards and been shortlisted for other awards for her work. And a lot of her focus is on individual, real stories of human drama and people trying to find, who they are, where they come from. So sort of those types of things, which you see in the book that I'm going to be talking about today. She's a highly acclaimed author, but I've never heard of her, which is interesting given how long she's been writing for. So pretty strange, but I think that's what happens sometimes, especially when you have authors from other countries, and you're never going to be able to read everything. So without further ado, let's talk about The Zigzag Way. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So The Zigzag Way focuses on the character of Eric. He is a literature graduate student who is working on his main project, which is a book that he's writing, and he's getting some funding to do that. And he's currently in a relationship with a woman named M, who is also a graduate student, and she is set to travel to Mexico for grad school work. And Eric wants to come along with her. She seems indifferent to the idea. They don't seem to really have a good relationship, at least as described by this book. But they decide to go to Mexico together, where Eric wants to hang around with M, but she's like, you have to write your book that you're going to write, and also, go do other things while I'm busy with my work. But what's really interesting to Eric is that he attends a lecture where he hears a bunch of different names about local Mexican villages, and they sound familiar to him because he recalls a story that his grandfather told about how his father had worked in some mines in Mexico because he was a Cornish miner who left from England over to Mexico for work. And so he realizes that he might find a little bit more about himself if he heads to this remote Mexican mining town, and he might learn a little bit about his family in the process. His girlfriend seems again indifferent and she's just like, go, I don't really care. And so he goes and he meets Doña Vera, who is, I think, an Italian woman living at a hacienda, which is which serves as sort of like a museum or a center for studies on the Huichol people, who are the native Mexicans in that area. And so he meets Doña Vera. They come at odds with one another. She suspects that he has a hidden agenda, and is looking too deeply into what this center is really for. And at the same time, he believes that Doña Vera isn't really being truthful about herself, that she might be, she doesn't really have a purpose for why she's working with these natives. And it seems like she's has somewhat of a white savior complex about her. And once Eric leaves for the night, she has a nightmare about how she seems to be stuck in this prison, which is this hacienda. She doesn't really seem to want to be there, and I don't know why she stays. No one is really forcing her to stay there. Eric later talks with one of the people who live in the nearby ghost town, Andre, who tells him, about the mysterious Doña Vera and how her beliefs don't seem to line up with the way she acts, including the fact that she doesn't understand the Huichol language. So, she keeps those people around, but she doesn't know how to talk with them. And she's talking for them without understanding even what they're saying. It's also implied that Doña Vera might have come from Nazi Germany or fascist Italy, and that, if that's true, that completely changes the meaning of the story, but it's not really elaborated on. At the same time, we learn about the character of Betty, who's actually the great-great-grandmother of Eric, and we learn about what happened to her in 1910, how her family moved from Cornwall to Mexico so that her husband could be a miner. She expresses frustrations with the mining company and how it seems to be exploiting the workers. And then the Mexican Revolution breaks out, and some of the miners leave the mining things to pick sides, and it's just difficult to do mining in general because the war has broken out. And during this time, Betty gives birth to Paul, which I think is Eric's actual grandfather, and she dies in the process. Paul and then later Davy end up traveling to America in order to find a better life, and they end up staying there rather than going back to Mexico or even England. And this eventually leads to Eric being born, where he discovers the truth about his grandfather. And then this is all taking place during the Day of the Dead. So Eric visits the Day of the Dead sort of ceremonies as the story is winding down. He hears from Rodrigo's ghost, who is Doña Vera's ex-husband, who she didn't seem to really have a great relationship with. And again, he implies that she might be a Nazi or something. And then we also hear from Betty's ghost, and she seems to want to learn more about Eric. And I think he reaches some form of enlightenment or something. It's not exactly clear, but that's where the story ends there. In terms of analysis, the story is filled with some themes that are there but are not quite fleshed out as one would hope. It seems like Anita Desai is just gesturing towards us and saying, "See, this is what I'm talking about," but never quite establishing what it is she wants to say about all of this. One of the themes that she's working with is that of the hidden past, how Eric is barely aware of his grandparents' history, that he didn't really know that his grandparents had spent time in Mexico. It was only mentioned once, and now he's surprised when he finds out that there's an actual history here, and they were a big part of the town that existed. At the same time, Doña Vera also has a secret history that she's not really elaborating on. There's questions about, what she's actually doing at this Institute for Huichol Studies, if she's actually helping the Huichol people, and, what happened before she came to Mexico. What is she trying to run away from? What's the deal with her ex-husbands? There's a lot of questions there that I don't think Anita Desai ever really tries to answer. She just throws it up in the air, and we're left to wonder, is this woman actually a terrible human being? Another way this hidden past is sort of elaborated on is through the setting, because it takes place in a city hidden in the mountains, sort of the city's own past has been hidden away, tucked away, and only the people who live there really understand it. And so Eric is just finding out for this first time by venturing forth into the Sierras. At the same time, this all takes place during the Day of the Dead festivities. And the Day of the Dead, brings forth the dead, and it unveils the past, because Eric learns more about Rodrigo and Doña Vera and Betty through the Day of the Dead festivities. The problem is that it doesn't reveal enough. Like, these characters show up, and then they only show up in the last 15 pages, and not enough time is spent, fleshing out what it means that they're here, or what exactly is being revealed. And if anything is revealed, none of the characters actually do anything with this knowledge. Eric seems really indifferent to everything that happens in this story. He learns that Doña Vera might be a Nazi, and he's just like, okay, that's interesting, maybe reflective of the time that he's in 2004. Whereas if you had learned that now, you'd be fairly angry and frustrated with that given person. But I don't know. It just seems like if you find out someone might be a Nazi, if someone, might be a pretender, you would do something more. I think the story is trying to set up Eric as sort of like exposing the real Doña Vera, but he doesn't really do anything to do it. It's just he just gains the knowledge and just moves on with his life, which seems like a weird way to handle things. So you can get what I'm saying when, like, it's not fully fleshed out. I feel like Anita Desai could have done a little bit more to explain what she's trying to get at here. And then there's also the idea of the false savior, of the white savior even, which I think Eric himself is, because he comes into this town and he thinks that he can make a difference, but he's just a white dude coming in to protect the natives, and it comes off as a little bit racist. And Doña Vera, like, she is another false savior. She pretends to help the Huichol people, but more is revealed that shows that she doesn't really know what she's doing. She might not even be trying to do anything. It might just be, for her, this is a status or a reputation thing, where it looks good that she's giving lectures about these things and she's inviting people to come over, but she's only doing it to hobnob with the elites of society, that it looks good for her. For her, the Huichol are decorative and really nothing more. And I think that's an interesting element of the story that I wish was fleshed out a little bit more. Like, the Huichol people are decorative. Like, she's presumably saving them from a lifetime of mining and obscurity, but they're still decorative for her. They're not any better off. And even, like, none of the characters truly talk to the Huichol people to get their opinion. And if that was intentional on Desai's part, I would say, wow, that's great, but I don't think it's intentional here. She speeds way too quickly through the story to really get that feeling. Ultimately, my question is, like, why does any of this matter? If none of the characters particularly care, and Anita Desai isn't going to tell me why I should care about these characters or the events that are taking place or these reveals that are happening, like, why does anything in this story matters? And that question is never fully answered. I'm never given an answer as to why I should care, why any of this matters. And so ultimately, it's hard to say that this is an important book at all. It just seems like words on a page without any meaning. I think Anita Desai has an idea of what she's trying to say, but she fumbles the bag, and ultimately it really hurts the story. Anyway, those are my thoughts on The Zigzag Way by Anita Desai. Based on this story, I haven't really had any incentive to view more of her work down the road, but that said, I would be interested in reading some of her earlier work to see if maybe there was something of more substance there, because here it doesn't feel like there's really any substance, and it's hard to really get invested in the story. I just found myself, like, getting distracted pretty easily while reading it, because there didn't seem to be any hook there to keep me there. If you read this before, you simply want to comment on something I said here, do so below. Let's have a discussion, if you can have one, about this book. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this author and this book if they don't already know. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and zigzaggy travels. Farewell.